Is the Biden administration about to trade long-term security for a short-term political win in the Middle East? As rumors of a new, controversial framework between the United States and Iran reach a boiling point, the backlash is already beginning to shatter the fragile consensus on international security. Before we continue, if you want to stay on top of everything happening in U.S. politics, hit that subscribe button right now and leave a like. It really helps this channel grow and ensures you don't miss the latest updates on these rapidly developing situations. The latest firestorm erupted Monday morning when Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid took to social media to sound the alarm. He didn't mince words, calling the emerging deal between Washington and Tehran an absolute disaster. For context, we are now nearly 3 months into a brutal conflict in the Middle East, a conflict that has demanded constant American diplomatic attention. Reports indicate that the U.S. has been engaging in high-stakes, back-channel negotiations, aiming to finalize a framework that would supposedly bring an end to this cycle of violence. However, Lapid, a former Prime Minister of Israel, has made his stance crystal clear. He believes this deal is a monumental error in judgment. He pointed out that while he has supported the necessary military operations against Iranian-backed threats from the very start, the current diplomatic path being carved out by the White House is fundamentally flawed. He argues that by negotiating this specific deal, the United States is essentially handing a lifeline to a regime that remains the primary financier of instability throughout the region. What does this actually mean for the geopolitical landscape? If the U.S. proceeds with this framework, we are looking at a potential fracture in the intelligence and security cooperation between Washington and its closest allies in the Middle East. It sends a message that the current administration is prioritizing a quick exit strategy over the long-term containment of Iranian influence. Critics suggest that such an agreement might lift sanctions or provide economic relief to Tehran in exchange for temporary pauses in hostilities, which opponents argue will only allow Iran to regroup, rearm, and return to their aggressive posturing with even greater resources. For the Biden administration, the pressure is immense. They are dealing with an election cycle, a fractured base, and a Middle East that seems to be spiraling further out of control. They likely view this as a path to stabilizing global oil markets and preventing a direct regional war that would draw in American boots on the ground. But for those on the ground in the Middle East, like Yair Lapid, the view is much grimmer. They see a Western power willing to compromise the safety of its regional partners to secure a headlines-worthy peace deal that might not last through the next calendar year. The outcomes here are stark. On one hand, you have a potential temporary de-escalation that buys the White House some breathing room in the polls. On the other hand, you risk a long-term strategic catastrophe where Iran solidifies its position, emboldens its proxies, and effectively wins a geopolitical stalemate. If the opposition in Israel and potentially other regional players decides that the U.S. is no longer a reliable partner in this specific endeavor, we could see a massive shift in how these countries handle their own national security, perhaps moving toward more unilateral, aggressive military action that the U.S. can no longer influence or restrain. So, where do you stand on this? Do you believe the Biden administration's push for a deal is a necessary step toward peace? Or is Yair Lapid right that this is a dangerous disaster that will only hurt American interests in the long run? Drop your opinion in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to hear your perspective on whether this diplomatic gamble is worth the price. We are watching these developments very closely, as the fallout from these negotiations will dictate the tone of U.S. foreign policy for the foreseeable future. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the players involved are clearly operating with very different definitions of what peace actually looks like. Stay tuned, stay informed, and keep questioning the narrative. I'm here to make sure you get the full story, regardless of the political noise. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.